You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Berger couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Of July, the stretch, the last week. Here we go. Off-season conditioning program going to make us all stronger, just like Eric Kimry alluded to there. Welcome in. Tim Hill, unrestricted free agent. Huge weekend for Gamecock athletics. Huge weekend in the state of South Carolina. The magnitude of the news. I'm not a guy that's going to overhype a single recruit. I'm not that guy who gets into the ins and outs of recruiting drama every single day. But I am a guy who tries to look at things in perspective and see the big picture, see the forest through the trees and all that. And G.G. Jackson being the number one recruit in the country from a basketball standpoint from Ridgeview High School, having verbally committed to North Carolina, then decommitted, first decommitment from the University of North Carolina basketball since 2003, knowing that no player in the modern era has decommitted from North Carolina and then gone to another school, knowing that Lamont Paris is a new basketball coach that didn't exactly thrill the South Carolina fan base when his name was announced as Frank Martin's successor. Adding all that in there, knowing the history of South Carolina basketball, superstar basketball players leaving the state to go play college. Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett going to the NBA, Jermaine O'Neal going straight to the NBA. A bunch of players going to North Carolina, Raymond Felton, Larry Davis. Go down the line, man. Most recently, Zion Williamson, John Morant. And now, G.G. Jackson stops that trend, changes that trend. I mean, completely kind of reverses all of that, having verbally committed to North Carolina and then changing his mind, reclassifying, moving up a year. He's going to turn 18 in December, I just read. But now playing college basketball 1 year earlier, doing it in a South Carolina uniform. Man, I know a lot of Gamecock fans were excited over the weekend for sure. See you guys weighing in here. Jason, Anthony, and Hope joining us right off the top on the YouTube live stream and weighing in. Really appreciate you guys making the show better with your comments. Feel free. I would love to hear your thoughts on this G.G. Jackson news because it's fascinating to me. I'm always the one that says, whoa, pump the brakes. It hasn't played it down, hasn't played a second, hasn't seen a pitch in college athletics, right? We don't know. It's all projection. Basketball seems to be the clearest when elite players are at the high school level. It seems to miss the fewest times because it's right there in front of you, right? There are only 5 guys on the court. There's only so much transition that goes on. No pun intended there with the basketball reference in transition. I mean from one level to the next. So I'm not trying to tell you that G.G. Jackson is going to lead Gamecock basketball to the promised land this season. But I am trying to tell you just the magnitude of his commitment completely overshadows or dwarfs what we might end up seeing on the court from him. The fact that Lamont Paris came in year number 1 and made this happen. The fact that G.G. Jackson was ranked number 1 in the country and just won MVP honors in a big all-star camp. The perception here is more significant than the reality for South Carolina basketball. Now, what ends up happening, nobody knows at this point. But let me take you back through Saturday. What was I doing on Saturday? I forget. I think we might have done an early pool trip. That's what we did to try to survive the 9, 7, and 2-year-old. We got to wear that 2-year-old out. Otherwise, he just completely dominates us. So that was the plan on Saturday. Family pool trip, and tried to get back in time for a nap. So I hop on the Twitter 2-ish, I think. Saturday afternoon, I see Gigi Jackson says commitment at 3. How about that? That was kind of out of the blue. I think he had just popped it up earlier in the morning. He says commitment at 3. Then I see Dawn Staley pop up, sing along on Twitter at Dawn Staley. Ain't nothing but G thing, baby, with some emojis. And then I tweeted out at the time, no detective, but I think 3 o'clock is going to be a good thing for Gamecock fans. And then there it was. At 3:03, I would like to announce that I will be reclassifying to the class of 2022, committing to the University of South Carolina to further my career in education. All caps. Now let's have fun, fams, with the Spurs up, a rooster emoji, and hashtag hometown hero from Gigi Jackson at _Gigi Jackson on Twitter. Lamont Paris with the reaction, keeping with Dawn Staley's old school theme with the notorious B.I.G. gif there. If you don't know, now you know. Jeff Goodwin was over at the Peach Jam, covers national college basketball, and snapped a picture of a ear-to-ear smiling Lamont Paris with a couple of coaches right beside him, looking very suspiciously at the picture, I think. And Goodman saying Gigi Jackson, arguably the best player in the country, headed to play for this man at South Carolina. Huge pickup for new coach Lamont Paris, who looks pretty excited here at the gym at Peach Jam after hearing the news. Spencer Rattler putting out a picture of he and Gigi Jackson, just saying, let's get it. Kerry Rich, the captain, now on the staff with Lamont Paris and company, saying, Gamecock Nation, now let's have some fun. I promise we can't do it without you, with the hashtag Defy the Myth and just getting started. Also with a gif of Denzel Washington smiling in that one. So you don't have to just listen to me go on and on about the impact of Gigi Jackson and the whole thing. I would love to hear your thoughts, but also on this program, try to get you more qualified opinions as much as possible. And that leads us to our first guest this morning, former Gamecock basketball player himself, and now has been running the USC Lettermen Club for a while. I should probably just refer to you as Mr. President, Branden Conrad? Is that's how you ask to be referred to, I'm sure, correct?
I think right now it's Mr. Immediate Past President.
Okay, excellent.
But,
who's running that thing now? Who you got going?
We got Steven Shepard running the reins, and as always, Shelly Levitt. Anyone on the show remembers the great Courtney Levitt. Shelly runs the day-to-day and certainly keeps us in mind.
Very nice. At Branden _Conrad, where you can follow him, and Branden does coach basketball in the area as well. What was your reaction? What do you make of Gigi Jackson and the big announcement on Saturday, sir?
Yeah, Tim, I think you obviously just read through the Twitter reaction, and it was fun following Dawn and Lamont and Kerry Rich on Saturday, and then the rest of the country, not only Gamecock Nation. So I was very excited to hear the news. Had heard some chatter for the last couple of weeks, so it was good to finally see that come through about 3 p.m. on Saturday. Which, if anyone else is out there, it's only a coincidence that we were beating the number 1 team in the country in football on a rerun at the same time when that news came out. So it's certainly a great day to be a Gamecock.
Yeah, I think Shane Beamer pointed that out on the SEC Network, or the replay of Carolina and Alabama back in 2010. So, Branden, one thing that drives me nuts from where I sit,
Mhm.
and being in TV and radio and my whole career, last 20 plus years or whatever it is the overhype of guys
Mhm.
going from high school to college a lot of times, and also the oversell of the impact of a single commitment. In this case, though, I find it to be pretty worthy of all the hype, all the excitement, maybe the enthusiasm that goes into this. You played for Carolina. You're wearing your Carolina garb right now. Your swag. You understand the program a lot better than I do from the inside out. What do you think, in the big picture, this thing means?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tim. And honestly, when I kind of sit back after the excitement of Saturday, I think that's the $1 million question. And I think there's several variables there. I think the first one is there's excitement. And in July, when Spurrier refers to it as talking season for about every college sport, it's fun to be talked about, and that's the start of it, right? I think Coach Beamer did a great job of starting that in December when Rattler came and his teammate followed along, and so you had about a week long of just Gamecock being not only in local news but national news, and I think he's done a tremendous job of representing our university and building the program, but more so in today's world, building the brand and really keeping that up. So I think that's the first variable. Coach Parrish has been on the job for 4 months, and I went to his press conference with my middle son Duncan, so that was a lot of fun meeting him there. But I haven't had a ton of time to get over and see any of the new guys in summer practices, and a lot of that, Tim, is because in today's world of the transfer portal, you know, Coach Parrish had to come in and recruit half a team. You look at LSU, and they had to come in and recruit a full team. And so, I think it takes time, but in month 4, he's got his guy. As you mentioned, in basketball, it's a lot easier to make a huge impact day one with a guy like Gigi Jackson. If you want to compare him to Jadeveon Clowney, there's 5 guys on the court, not 11 on each side of the ball. And so I think he can make a difference day one. At the same time, it's a lot of pressure to put on a kid who's going to be 17 the first week of school. And a lot of pressure, especially with the turnover of the team. So I think $1 million question comes in what's around him this season. But then the other variable is building the future going forward. I think getting the number 1 recruit in the country to come to South Carolina means that you can start talking about South Carolina nationally. It can be done here. I know that there's a lot of talent in Lexington, South Carolina, where I live right now, with a certain individual who's still in high school. But to be 2 years ahead and watching Gigi do this, I think that only bodes well for us.
Well, it's not like it's never happened before. There have
Yeah.
been big time basketball players to come to the University of South Carolina. PJ Dozier was probably the most recent,
Mhm.
with the most hype as a McDonald's All-American. But I think Gamecock fans, and it's only human nature to a lot of times to go, the grass is greener, or remember the
Yeah.
ones that got away. And when you have massive
Yeah.
names like Ray Allen, for instance, Ja Morant, and
Yeah.
Zion Williamson, to me, that's where this changes a little bit. That
Mhm.
feeling, I think, that Gamecock basketball is just kind of doomed to some degree, or
Mhm.
just resigned to be, a program that can't get to that next level. The perception of this, and Anthony Edwards is probably the best
Yeah.
comparison from
Yeah.
Georgia, a guy who went there for a year, didn't change the program. I don't know if he changed the program's perception, but I don't know if Georgia's ever had to battle it quite like South Carolina has. So I don't know if it's going to happen on the court, Branden, but I do know off the court, like you're talking about, the way that South Carolina basketball is going to be talked about moving forward is forever changed by
Mhm.
this, no matter what happens on the court. And I think that is massively significant. I would imagine as a letter winner, as an alum, you take some pride in that as well.
Yeah, there's tremendous amount of pride. And again, going back to look what's been done in the last 4 months. You had a kid give Frank Martin kudos. I mean, he was selling him, and a lot of people would say that he was sold on coming here under Frank. And then just the timing of it. I mean, Lamont had no time to come in and pitch who he was, and it's always got to be a fit, right? I mean, that's a big decision, and so kind of unfair on the timing phrase, but Lamont's ability to go back in and take from Chapel Hill. I kind of, whether it's football or basketball, love to stay up with it, but I always remove the stars and look at who they're going up against. And I remember one of the coaches on Coach Martin's staff one time, I think it was Seventh Woods actually, and he said at the end of the day I lost to Roy Williams, and so we were right there. Obviously, he was in our backyard, and it was a tough loss, but PJ, we won and took from Louisville and Chapel Hill at the height. And today, not only were we going against Chapel Hill, he was already committed, and we went and flipped that. And probably the greatest stat of the weekend, Tim, was I read somewhere that Chapel Hill has not had a basketball player decommit since J.R. Smith in 2003, and he decommitted to go to the NBA straight there. And that just shocked me. I mean, that's 20 years they haven't had one decommitment, and we're the first.
Name, image, and likeness.
Mm-hmm.
It's been talked about a ton in college sports and clearly has been playing a massive role in recruiting. What do you think? How much of a percentage chance? We had John Combs on, a Westwood High School coach, on recently. He said, you're crazy if you think it had nothing to do with this or didn't have a large part in this. What about you? What do you think name, image, and likeness had to do in this whole process?
I think everyone's still trying to navigate that field, Tim, and I think it obviously had to play a part. We had to compete in the field, but at the same time, going back to what I just said and who you're playing against, Chapel Hill has some pockets as well, and they have a long history of getting players, and so was NIL tied to it? We'd be crazy not to think that it wasn't. But I don't think that's why he's here. I think, he wanted to be here. He wanted to stay home, prove he could do it. And, it's just a great fit for us. He can come in right away, be the guy, and turn his life around in a year.
Well, the way that the story goes is that Dawn Staley and Asia Wilson got in on the conversation and tried to convince Gigi Jackson he could have a similar impact on the men's program that Asia Wilson did, staying home and going to the University of South Carolina and win a national championship, the whole thing. I always bristle at the men's versus women's comparison just because they are kind of two totally different environments in college athletics. How do you see it being a former player and seeing the two programs from a lot closer than I have?
Yeah, Tim, I think that was one of the most encouraging things of the weekend. I think when you look across South Carolina athletics, you have Coach Beamer, Dawn Staley, Lamont Paris. Dawn and Coach Beamer have done a tremendous job on Twitter. Dawn's got a trophy bag and a reputation now of success, but she's still on Twitter actively every single day, making a difference in the community with her team and sports. I think Coach Beamer does a tremendous job for the length of time he's been a head coach. He's one of the best in the country at it. And so, and then at the press conference, you learned that Lamont's never had Twitter. And so, I think he's learning from that, but probably watching his counterparts at South Carolina and seeing what a difference it's making. And so, to me, I thought, success breeds success, and it's just contagious, and positive attitudes are contagious. And so, probably no coincidence when we're winning baseball national championships. We have our greatest run in school history at football at the same time. The three, basketball, baseball, and football, we beat the number one team in the country. No coincidence, those were all within a 12-month period. I mean, it's just contagious. And so I've always wondered and hoped that you can start utilizing our strengths at the university. So start Dawn and Coach Beamer and Coach Paris and all the other great coaches. Coach Annan with soccer does a great job getting out in the community. Utilizing each other is something that I think's gone untapped for a while. And then on Saturday, you see Dawn, her excitement before it even came out. Coach Beamer, I mean, all of Gamecock Nation was talking about it and with each other. And then more than anything, you saw Spencer Rattler put out a tweet and the connection between him and Gigi. That's what's really going to take off if we can get this thing going.
Well, I think everybody kind of moving in the same direction and pulling the resources like you referred to, always a positive thing, no matter what organization you're a part of, and maybe part of the frustration, I think, from Gamecock fans through the years. And now it's on to, you mentioned the pressure that's going to be on a 17-year-old at the start of the season. He'll turn 18 in December with Gigi Jackson. What is any kind of reasonable expectation, especially for you, a guy who wore the uniform and knows how it is on a day in, day out basis in an SEC basketball program?
So, I'm going to avoid that question, Tim.
Right to the side.
Here's what I think. One, too much pressure to put on when you look at Duke, who's got 5 of them, and still not be able to win the national championship. There still is a tremendous amount of respect for guys that have been around the program for 4 years. Now in today's world, that means 5 years. And so veteran experience is really important. Then when you look around the league, the articles I've read is SEC basketball really changed 2012. You went kind of on a spree where you hired some really well-known coaches who have done it. The SEC spent some money invested in improving the basketball world. And so you had Ben Howland come in, you had Bruce Pearl, you had Rick Barnes, you had Frank Martin here, Kwanzo Martin. And so, they really did a tremendous job of enhancing SEC basketball. I think this past year is the first year all season long till the tournament. SEC was really probably the number one conference in college basketball. I don't know a time growing up in Charlotte and ACC country when that's ever been the case. And so they've done a tremendous job of improving the brand of basketball. And then you look at Arkansas's getting it done on the recruiting trail. Auburn's obviously really good. So the league's there, but at the same time, you also have 6 brand new coaches, and it kind of flipped from 2012. All 6 coaches are kind of your up and coming, don't have a big Final Four run behind them. And so it'll be interesting to see. So not to avoid your question, but to answer it in a way that the league's really good. There's, a lot of pressure on Gigi, which will make it a lot of fun to watch. You're going to get to see a top 5 draft pick every time you go to the Colonial Center. Who doesn't want to see that? I remember just wanting to go see Anthony Edwards, and he delivered. But you have a brand new coach and a lot of transfers coming in, filling starting roles. And so to be fair to everyone, you're going to have to see how that gels before you can make any type of prediction. I think, Tim, if you asked me that same question and we had all of last year's team back, that's a different answer that I have.
Yeah, that's part of the fascinating environment that Gigi Jackson will come into and kind of be the center of, fairly or unfairly. That's just what it's going to be for sure. Yeah. I think maybe from a Gamecock fan perspective, I think you can go 2 ways on that, right? Having not experienced a ton of success, maybe the expectation for this year's team and him personally isn't as high as it would be other places. On the other side, knowing that you haven't experienced that much success trying to get there and kind of having the burden to get there, it might be more pressure than at another place. We'll see how it plays out. I think the way that Lamont Paris handles it, what we see on the court, what we see around him as well, the other guys playing, how they play, will all mix into that. And again, from my perspective, Branden, what this has done is put an instant stamp of credibility on Lamont Paris as a recruiter and making the program relevant. And I think maybe more than anything, that's what Gamecock fans thirst for, is that Gamecock basketball isn't taking a back seat to other programs out there. When Gamecock fans look around and say, well, why is Tennessee basketball so much better than South Carolina or Auburn or some of those other programs you mentioned? Like, you can live with Kentucky. Everybody knows Kentucky is Kentucky. Even Arkansas or Florida, they have some track record there. But to get instant credibility and relevance is a big thing for Gamecock basketball specifically. What are your early impressions of Lamont Paris? I know you haven't had too much interaction maybe with them. From my perspective, a relative unknown, but I thought the opening press conference was spot on across the board, and I feel like his personality might be exactly what this program needs coming off of a decade of Frank Martin. What about you?
Yeah, so I think when I look at Coach Parrish, don't know him well yet. Look forward to the opportunity to getting to know him and watching his style. I do think I was also very impressed with the press conference. Although if you're not impressed with a press conference, it's probably going to be a long road ahead.
No doubt.
But I think, again, when I get back to fit, it's always got to be a fit. And so when I look at Lamont, there was a lot of genuine, this is who I am, this is how I coach. And I think South Carolina needs that when you look at Coach Beamer versus Coach Muschamp. Coach Beamer is a lot more transparent and really just genuine in how he goes about things. And you can coach in different styles and formats, but to coach the other way, you kind of have to have a record that Coach Saban produces to be able to kind of have a standoffish mentality. But I'm very excited about Coach Parrish. I think his style of play just changed by getting someone like a Gigi. I mean, that's part of it, right? Is I think he even said in the press conference, based on who we have on the court is really how we will be putting out our philosophy each day. And so that just changed on Saturday for sure.
No doubt about it. I got 9 and 7-year-old boys and play all kinds of sports, and it's really obvious. If you get good players, you're a good coach.
Yeah.
If you don't, it is much more difficult real quick. This is obviously on a much more massive level, but I think that philosophy definitely still holds true. And to have a guy, not just that is so highly recruited, but he seems pretty versatile. And in the game of basketball, how it's evolved, and you've seen it firsthand, the way that big guys can now do so much more. First of all, they're just that much more skilled, seemingly growing up, and then the way that the game has spaced, the way that big guys shoot threes a lot more than they ever have, and the back to the basket thing is gone too. To me, that factors into all this with Gigi Jackson as well. Whereas maybe when I was in school 20 years ago, you get a 6, 8, 9, 10 guy in there. If he's not under the basket, there are going to be people mad. And now it's exactly the opposite. If he's not handling the ball outside and shooting threes and getting his making it as exciting as possible, I feel like then fans will be upset as opposed to how it used to be back in the day. Maybe you saw kind of the evolution of that during your time at Carolina in the Bruce Ellington kind of era there, and getting up and down the floor. Where do you like the product of college basketball these days, knowing that?
Yeah, so it's inevitable that you're going to have change, and so I love college basketball, and I loved it growing up in Charlotte and going to games, and I love it today. And they're completely different games. And then when you look back at uh, when my dad played back in the late '70s, I won't say where he played, but when he played there, there's a different style there. They had a lot shorter shorts. I guess that's come back into style. Don't pull up any footage of where we were wearing our shorts, but the college brand is great. I mean, I think what you see is you just have a lot bigger guys out there, and so the court's kind of shrunk in a manner. And I think Frank talked about that a lot. I mean, it wasn't any the court was the same length and width, but you just had much bigger guys that could do a lot different things, and that's how it's evolved. And so I think it naturally, um, just went to push outside the 3-point range. And Steph Curry, who I grew up playing against, certainly changed that on a dime. But I think it has to. And then just the way guys train at such an earlier age, they're able to do so much more. And I think that's what, without being able to make predictions for this year, your brand of basketball just enhanced tremendously by adding Gigi. He can. You got to have guys who can defend at the rim. He can do that. He's a long wing presence. Our Final Four run, we had a lot of guards that were 6'7", and it's just harder in the passing lanes, and to score against that. So off one recruit, you obviously he's got his offensive skill set, and he'll learn the defensive philosophy at the college level. But just his length and athleticism is a game changer. It's able to do things that you can't coach.
Branden Conrad, growing up, you mentioned the Charlotte area you just dropped and having to play against Steph Curry back in the day. You got a go-to Steph Curry story that you like to tell people to sum up that experience, or there are several different instances that pop in your head when you mention battling him back in the day?
Yeah, so one, just having 7 5-year-old boys myself and a 2-year-old daughter, it's great to have a Steph Curry who is just a great role model. But having played against him, they were at our rival high school, Charlotte Christian. I went to Providence Day in Charlotte, and just a class act kid who really just got better and better each year. His little brother, I think, was probably a better high school player than Steph, but it's just been tremendous to watch his progression. I'll just leave you with a stat that he ended my high school and college career. So little salty on that one, but if I'm picked on to do it, I guess he's okay.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. Tell me, you outscored Steph Curry in a few games back in the day.
I know I have in my head, but we'd have to go back and check the books.
That's fair for sure. Branden Conrad, former Gamecock basketball player, Gamecock Lettermen's Association, all part of the alumni base right there, still sporting the Carolina gear today. Man, appreciate the insight on the Gigi Jackson situation and more. Love to have you back on the program sometime soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. Branden_Conrad, where you can find him on Twitter. And interesting insight there. I knew that Branden had grown up in the Charlotte area. I didn't make the connection there the exact time. I remember the NIT game. I was there when Davidson came to the Colonial Life Arena with Steph Curry back in the day. Forgot that was exactly when Branden's career ended. But, man, growing up and watching the Steph Curry evolution, that's got to be a trip. I mean, just from my perspective, working in Columbia, seeing him come in to the Chick-fil-A Classic as a high school player, then at Davidson, and obviously watching him go on the national stage. But the way that thing has morphed, and then growing up a kid in North Carolina as well, having gone to a bunch of Charlotte Hornets games growing up, watching his dad Del Curry, knowing all of that, crazy story. And Gigi Jackson's kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum in a lot of ways, right? Number one prospect in the country. Steph Curry wasn't that. And it's crazy in all of sports, but especially basketball, how you can take different paths, right? LeBron James is the example of being the number one guy and absolutely living up to that hype and taking it to amazing places. But more often than not, it's the guys that go the slow burn that end up having long-term NBA success. Gigi Jackson now fits in the new trend, right? You almost have to, in a lot of ways these days, get national hype in your high school career if you're going to be a high draft pick anywhere in the lottery. And On3, by the way, which I go through Gamecock Central, has reclassified now Gigi Jackson into that class of 2022. So he was the number one player in the class of 2023, being 17 years old now. But instead, he's going to come to college a year early, skip his senior year. So that moves him back into a different class. They put him at number 10 nationally in the class of 2022. And the article that I was reading, I think Jamie Shaw did this. He was the guy who broke the news and has been kind of on top of this the whole way for On3, says that NBA scouts still saying somewhere in like the 5 to 12 range in the NBA lottery, not this upcoming draft. I guess it will be this upcoming draft you will be eligible for now, since the draft just happened, couple of weeks ago. It will be about a year from now. The path for Gigi Jackson is to stop at South Carolina for one season and go on and move on and be an NBA lottery pick. That is something that has not happened in that way. We've seen Jermaine O'Neal from Eau Claire High School just skip it all completely. Kevin Garnett, the same thing. We haven't seen one and dones at the University of South Carolina. We saw a two and done, PJ Dozier. Didn't work out for PJ in the NBA draft. It has worked out on the larger picture from an NBA career in a lot of ways. But we haven't seen the one and dones at South Carolina. Anthony Edwards, the most recent guy in the SEC to do it over at Georgia. We saw, I think it's fair to say, a relatively minimal impact on their program in general. His coach is no longer there. South Carolina, Frank Martin always said, I'd love to have that problem, right? I come at college basketball with the old school mindset where it was never going to be even thought about to be a path at the blue blood programs like Duke or North Carolina. They required their guys to stick around, and it was just a battle back in the day to even skip a season or two and go to the NBA early. And obviously, Mike Krzyzewski made that shift, that transition real quick. And like Brandon was telling us, man, Duke gets 5 of these guys every year that are top 10-ish, top 25 type national players. So the reasonable expectation for Gigi Jackson on the basketball court and South Carolina in year number 1 of Lamont Paris, from where I sit, if we're going to go numbers wise, and that's how my brain thinks, right? And I understand stats can be skewed, but you need to be a double-digit scorer, and you need to, at 6'9"-ish, I think is where Gigi Jackson is, being listed kind of as a power forward. You need to be 6+ rebounds, a couple of block shots per game. That's what I'm thinking would be kind of the reasonable expectation. 10.6 rebounds, 2 block shots per game. I think you look at the stat sheet at the end of the year, I don't think that's asking too much for a guy that comes in with this reputation. Also knowing where the roster is for Lamont Paris and company, with so many guys transferring out of the program who got a bunch of playing time last year. The playing time will be there. I think this will be a matter of managing the playing time as opposed to earning the playing time for Gigi Jackson, it appears, from the outside looking in. Now, if you're going to say, I think where fans can be ridiculous is say the Gamecocks have to make the NCAA tournament now for this to really live up to the hype. And that's going to be a tall task. A tall task, because that just hasn't been what South Carolina basketball has been, a consistent tournament team. Now, if Lamont Paris does that, sky's kind of the limit, I think. I mean, just the fact that he's done this, which typically I would tell you, hey, it doesn't mean anything unless it translates. No, this means a lot. That this happened, that he pulled this off. Come in year one, take the guy, the homegrown guy, everything that means. And if you haven't been in the state of South Carolina the last 30 years or so, then it's hard to understand the big picture, the massive impact that this has, that it does mean more than just G.G. Jackson. It is so much larger than him. It means more than Lamont Paris. This, I think, goes into a mindset of how can South Carolina basketball as a state compete with big-time college basketball programs? How can you blame a kid like Zion Williamson who goes to Duke? You know, I haven't even mentioned Seventh Woods as one of those examples of big-time prospects that have gone to the University of North Carolina because Seventh Woods' career didn't really work out in college. But he was the most recent example of a homegrown national prospect who had South Carolina in serious consideration and picked North Carolina. And like at the end of the day, Branden mentioned, you get beat by Roy Williams in North Carolina in recruiting. It's nothing to hold your head about or be. There's no shame in that. And that's just what decades and decades of recruiting at a high level has been, by and large, for the University of South Carolina. A couple of exceptions, B.J. Mackey, P.J. Dozier. Couple of guys, Rolando Howell back in the day, another McDonald's All-American. So it has happened here and there. But to get a number one type guy and to get him away from North Carolina, like Branden mentioned, the significance of a decommitment for the first time since 2003. And I will add to that, the first time anyone has ever decommitted from North Carolina in the modern era and then gone to a different basketball program in college. That's a massive impact. And to do it in year number one, the first few months on the job before you've even coached a game, if you're Lamont Paris, and knowing that you came in not as a proven name brand, taking over for a proven name brand who came in with a national reputation in Frank Martin. Massive in so many ways. The impact it will have immediately on the court, I think that's where you got to pump the brakes the most. And this is almost the opposite of most things, right? Most of the time I would say, yeah, probably going to be a pretty good player and have an impact on the court, on the field. But in the big picture, maybe not such a big deal. This is the reverse of that. Perception is greater than reality here. Because the reality is G.G. Jackson wants to play in a South Carolina uniform for one season. And if he doesn't, it will probably be a bad sign for Gamecock fans. If G.G. Jackson ends up playing at Carolina for more than one season, I don't think that's going to be a good thing. That's going to be because he didn't show what he needed to show to be an NBA lottery pick where he's projected now. And it's counterintuitive in a lot of ways, right? I'm from the old Tim Duncan era where he decides to stay for 4 years, even though he could have been a big-time draft pick. That's just not really a thing these days. That's certainly not the NBA model. And the new collective bargaining agreement that's going to go into effect to impact everyone drafted after next year's draft reportedly had a big part in all of this and is a big reason why G.G. Jackson has now foregone his senior year in high school and moved up a year, started the college basketball clock a year earlier. So a fascinating, massive news in so many ways. Jason weighing in on the YouTube live stream saying, great interview with Branden. Nice to hear from him. Did he transfer from Navy? Well, good question. I'll have to go back and check that. If he did, I didn't realize it. Troy, a resident Clemson fan, saying, I can't believe GG passed up on a chance to play for Brad Brownell at Clemson. Oh, well, another 15-15 season on the way. That's Troy's, what is becoming nearly a daily shot at his own coach and program with Brad Brownell and Clemson basketball. And you got to lump them in a lot of ways when I'm talking about the state of South Carolina basketball not reeling in big-time in-state prospects. And the perception of that being those programs can't compete on a national level recruiting-wise and just have to almost have to live with the reality that they're not Duke and North Carolina in basketball. I mean, even Georgia Tech was Sam Frederick back in the day. Devin Downey, big-time in-state prospect, goes to Cincinnati before both of those guys end up transferring back to the University of South Carolina. There have been examples of big-time prospects, but never like this. Never originally committing to the University of North Carolina, decommitting, coming to South Carolina. Doing it with a first-year coach. Being a Columbia native. A lot of factors in the Gamecocks' favor here. But now in a lot of ways, it becomes, okay, what do you do with it? What happens from here? How do you handle it? And we're going to learn a lot about Lamont Paris. We already have learned a lot. We're going to learn a lot more real quick. We'll learn a lot about GG Jackson and not just, we know he's a skilled basketball player. Now we're going to learn those intangibles, right? How do you handle unfair expectations, massive pressure, big-time spotlight? Apparently that was a part of the selling point, right? You put hashtag hometown hero in the announcement tweet that he put out the other day. Now you got to live up to it. It's a lot of pressure for sure. But a lot of pressure in Gamecock basketball. I don't remember ever saying that. Even after the Final Four run. I mean, there was pressure, and clearly that's one of the reasons Frank Martin is not the Gamecock basketball coach as we sit here today, that success wasn't capitalized on. But it were even years after, right? Made it years after that run. There's no immediate pressure to perform like there is now in a lot of ways. So if you want to give me a reasonable expectation, I would love to hear it. Your expectation of GG Jackson and Gamecock basketball. Again, I think I don't know how long you can ride this, but I think it's going to be a while. You get a lot of cachet with fans, I think, just making this happen. And I don't even know if there is that immediate, okay, now you have to get back to the College World Series like it would be with baseball. Now you have to win 11 games like you've seen in football. I mean, if you're a Gamecock fan out there and you're saying, yeah, now you got to get to the Final Four, I think you know how ridiculous that sounds and how unlikely a run that was several years ago now. What are we going, 5 years now? And the likelihood, the small likelihood of that happening again. But just to have this happen, massive in so many ways. We'll get back to the GG Jackson significance and continue to talk about it today, having been the massive story over the weekend, not just for Gamecock basketball or Gamecock fans, but nationally what it is. But after our program on Friday, the news coming out from SEC Media Days in the preseason poll, Gamecock football picked 5th. Troy, I think, nailed exactly the 1 through 7 standings of the preseason poll. And let me pop those up there for you on the video portion of the podcast. This is coming from a Brent McMurphy tweet. The Gamecocks picked to finish 5th ahead of only Missouri and Vanderbilt. Georgia, the dominant first place. It was Kentucky 2, Tennessee 3, Florida 4. I think maybe the only switch there from Troy's prediction was Tennessee and Kentucky 2 and 3. I was a little bit surprised that Kentucky got the respect they did. I think they've earned it. And yeah, when I look at schedules and rosters, and guys coming back, returning starters, all of that, I think I would have put this. I would have flipped South Carolina and Florida, I think, and put South Carolina 4 and Florida 5. I don't know. I have a tough time with Missouri down there at 6. I would not be surprised if they finish 4th. But is that 2 through 6 spots in the SEC East this year that's going to be the most fun, I think, as we all sit here, unless something massively surprising happens with Georgia or Vanderbilt the other way. So ended up putting out the poll question the other day. What describes your feelings best about Gamecock football? Picked to finish 5th in the SEC East at SimHillUFA on Twitter. And almost half of the vote, the overwhelming number 1, was good motivation for the team. Second place, barely, was completely irrelevant with 20% of the vote over almost 20% of the vote from about right. And then in 4th place was disrespectful. So this, the 120 votes in, so take it for what it's worth. But this to me shows that Gamecock football fans, by and large, have some reasonable expectations for year number 2 with Shane Beamer. If disrespectful had been a lot higher on there, then I would say maybe people are getting a little ridiculous, getting a little out of hand. You got Spencer Rattler coming in, Shane Beamer in year 2. Yeah, and Troy mentions that he did have Tennessee and Kentucky flipped to 2 and 3. But the results of just that show me that I think, again, and I saw it in the Will Muschamp era, that there was patience. It was not an unreasonable, unwieldy type fan base that we see at other places. And I think it was kind of in line with Will Muschamp's reputation coming in, one, but knowing what South Carolina football has been by and large outside of a 4-year run from 2010 to 2013 with Steve Spurrier. Gamecock fans do not demand championships or anything ridiculous. You don't have to be a dominant football program for Gamecock fans to support the program. And I mean that as a compliment to Gamecock fans. As opposed to maybe like Tennessee, right? And that news also popping out soon after Friday's show ended. 18 NCAA level 1 violations is what the notice of allegation read for Tennessee's football program. And an absolute fascinating article out from the Athletics' Andy Staples. And again, I apologize for pumping up the Athletic, but I'm a fan. But Staples' whole point is that Tennessee almost fell on its own sword and knew that had to be the play with Jeremy Pruitt and at the end of the Phil Fulmer athletic director era, right? The play was with name, image, and likeness coming, the transition, because you read the number got up to what, right around $60,000 that Tennessee improperly put up out there, with including nail salon visits for I assume moms. I think it said parents of incoming recruits, improper recruiting visits during COVID where they were restricted, but apparently Jeremy Pruitt and company are like, nope, bring them on. Let's do it anyway. They'll never find out, even though we're going to text about it on our school-issued phones. So Tennessee either got to the point where they knew that they couldn't keep this from being unearthed even by the NCAA because the cheating was so blatant and so obvious from Jeremy Pruitt and company. And or they got to the point, Staples kind of argues that, hey, they wanted this guy out of there
the only way of getting Jeremy Pruitt out of there and not paying him a Will Muschamp ransom to do it with a buyout was to nail him themselves on these recruiting violations, on these NCAA violations. And so by doing that, they had to reduce some scholarships, but they already improved their program so much just by getting Pruitt out of there, just by moving forward with Danny White as an athletics director now and getting Josh Heupel in there. They're so much better off, and the NCAA has already kind of evolved its penalty process into trying to avoid what we've all hated about the NCAA penalties for years and years and years, right? Penalizing current coaches and players for past players and coaches' actions. It's never made a whole lot of sense other than to deter a program from going out and paying players, which, oh, by the way, now is just talked about openly and happens all the time. And $60,000 is nothing. $60,000 from a program standpoint when Texas Tech has their Matador Club coming out and saying we're paying every single football player, 100 of them, $25,000. That's the minimum. That's the salary for Texas Tech football players. We just wanted everybody to know that. Not that we're doing pay for play here, but this is going to be the agreement moving forward for name, image, and likeness at Texas Tech. So when you look at that compared to, you look at $60,000 total with a bunch of 18 violations. Andy Staples' argument was, well, Tennessee is, they're probably just going to get a slap on the wrist from the NCAA moving forward for these because they didn't get the lack of institutional control because they came in and basically convicted Pruitt themselves and saved themselves a bunch of money in the process. It makes me think from the Gamecock perspective, would it have been a better thing had Will Muschamp got caught cheating? I know it would have been a hit reputation-wise. And it makes me wonder, too, from the Tennessee standpoint, I think they got up to like the 11th and 13th best recruiting classes in the country while they were doing this. What are those other programs doing? If you're saying no to Tennessee when they're offering you, clearly they're going over the line. The most damning thing in there was Jeremy Pruitt's wife was paying for a car for a recruit's mom. The coach's wife was doing this. The coach's wife helped another parent, I think it was another one, might have been the same one, I don't know, put a down payment on an apartment in Knoxville. If Tennessee's doing this and only getting the 11th or 13th best recruiting classes in the country, what's everybody else doing? So I think from the Gamecock perspective, absolutely most South Carolina fans would sign up for how the Jeremy Pruitt era ended if you're plus $12, $15 million buyout. I mean, wouldn't the athletics department sign up for that? I get it. You take a hit, you're dragged through the mud. You get a guy like Pat Forty writing an article basically saying, this is what you get, Tennessee fans, for not hiring Greg Schiano and losing control of your program, having Phil Fulmer his article was kind of ridiculous. It seemed like there was a personal axe to grind there. Or he just wanted to say, I told you so, and you guys are bad people, and na-na-na-na-na. But Andy Staples, I think, was a really high-level thinking there. That Tennessee is so much better off. They handled what was a bad situation, clearly, in Jeremy Pruitt, and they handled it the best way possible, and they're plus $12 million because they don't have to pay him now that they have investigated and found themselves issues. So a different way for me to think about that. It makes a lot of sense, and I I think from the South Carolina perspective, this has been the most uneasy you felt about Tennessee football in a long time after, first of all, what they did head-to-head last year, just going up and down the field in Knoxville at will against the Gamecocks. But seeing the massive improvement offensively, especially with Josh Heupel in year number 1, knowing they did that with just a complete cluster off the field when Jeremy Pruitt left, the accusations of cheating at the time, the transfers out of the program, scholarship reductions and limitations, Heupel calling it his roster the thinnest in the country. Whew. So to see Tennessee go 7-6, knowing even though that your program went 7-6, I think battling now, selling offense is an easy sell to recruits. Jeremy Pruitt, what was he selling other than cars, apartment, down payments, extra trips? Come on, and we don't care about the NCAA, even though they told us that we can't have visits. You're coming out. Come on. So from as far as a vision of the program or results on the field, there wasn't much to go off there, and Tennessee is so much better off. Completely agree with where Staples was going with here. And if the NCAA comes down and feel like we just continue to see the writing on the wall in the path that big time college football is going to be separate from the NCAA. It's not going to be there. It's not going to be a package deal for the foreseeable future, right? What's the year that we put on that? Just the fact that the college football playoff is separate. We already saw that the NCAA just kind of said, "Nah, conferences, you guys figure out COVID. We're out. You figure it out." I mean, in effect, major college football has been separate from the NCAA for a long time. Maybe the only way is these non-conference games, the paycheck games that smaller schools have gotten and continue to get. But it looks like this next round, this latest round of realignment is going to take care of that or continue to phase that out. Now with the ACC going the 3-5-5 model, I think it'll spur the SEC to go to 3-6-6, assuming we just end up with the 16 teams. And I would assume that if the SEC is going to go that way, the Big Ten will do it as well. I don't think Ohio State fans will be pleased if Alabama continues to keep its traditional rivalries with 3 permanent opponents and then also has to play or gets the opportunity to go to show off its brand to every single SEC school every other year and make the trip once every 4 years. I think that'll be a competitive thing, and it'll just be the new model in college football in a lot of ways. You got the unlimited transfers seemingly coming down the pipe as well. We've already seen the transfer portal massively reshape things, along with name, image, and likeness now. So that I don't anticipate the news of what we heard on Friday, the 18 level 1 violations translating into any type of major NCAA restrictions and penalties. Don't think it's going to be a bowl ban. I think it'll probably be some recruiting visits reduced, a few scholarships reduced. Those have already been self-imposed to a large degree as well. Jeremy Pruitt ain't coming back to coach college football anytime soon, with what I read. I know he said he's looking forward to telling his side of the story. Good luck with that. First of all, I don't think anybody wants Jeremy Pruitt back in college football anytime soon, other than as a defensive coordinator, possibly. But I think that's who's going to take the major hit here. I think that's who should take the major hit. And I don't think this is going to encourage or discourage any more programs breaking the rules moving forward. I think college football has already changed so significantly since these things happen that it's a near non-issue, right? You can already pay guys. Guys are getting paid. So you almost have to go to a different type of thinking moving forward, and it would be pretty ridiculous for Tennessee to get hit with a ton of penalties off of this by and large moving forward. I think that's how I see it anyway. Don't know about you. But the Gamecocks picked to finish 5th, and Tennessee picked to finish 3rd. Didn't see that coming this time last year. I thought Josh Heupel had the largest challenge in front of him. And with Central Florida's record getting worse and worse each of his 3 years at that program, I think it was. I know he had proven they could score points and move the football and the whole thing, but I thought that the SEC was just a little bit different when it came to that. I think we've seen other coaches with that reputation come in, and SEC defense is proving to be a different animal. You know, Mike Leach hasn't exactly set the world on fire at Mississippi State offensively. Lane Kiffin, I think, with more success there. And that was an interesting part, too, of the preseason media polls, right? You know, if South Carolina is going to use the SEC East preseason poll and lack of respect or relative lack of respect being picked 5th, being picked behind a program like Florida, which they handled in Columbia last year, then what does Ole Miss think about it? We finished 2nd last year. Ole Miss picked to finish 4th this year. LSU 5th in the West, as I pop up Brett McMurphy's relay in the final tally there from SEC Media Days. Alabama won, as we all assume, and they were even more dominant than Georgia was in the West. Texas A&M 2. Arkansas 3, Ole Miss 4, LSU 5, Mississippi State 6, and Auburn down at 7. Shows you how much respect Jimbo Fisher has, even though they went 4-4 last year, how much pressure he's going to have on him moving forward, how much respect Sam Pittman gets as well. I mean, Arkansas being picked 3 compared to where they were pre-Sam Pittman is tremendous. I think I probably would have picked them 2 over Texas A&M going into this season. We see where I know that LSU program is another lightning rod, right? How quickly can Brian Kelly turn around the program? I think some people have them picked up there. I would have gone exactly where they ended up, down at 5. I don't think you can put them in front of Ole Miss or Arkansas or Texas A&M. I completely agree with that. I would have them above Mississippi State and Auburn, and Brian Harsin and Auburn. His theme, and we talked about it on Friday, was that the inquiry back in February, the people coming at he and his family and the whole thing, trying to get him out after 1 year, only strengthened the program and made this team closer, more accountable, more responsible, and they're going to respond accordingly this year. Well, the table is set for a massive upset run for sure for Auburn, as they were picked to finish last. So, man, what a weekend. What a last 10 days or so it's been since SEC Media Days kicked off in Atlanta. We couldn't have much more to talk about. With Gigi Jackson, the Ridgeview standout number 1 prospect in basketball in the class of 2023, making it official over the weekend, reclassifying to class of 2022, going to play basketball this season in college for the University of South Carolina. Plenty more on that as we continue to roll on this morning, and love to hear your thoughts as we roll on as well. We're moving well into hour number 2. Wanted to get a quick word in here. Buddy Scott Eisberg was on the program last week. He he witnessed firsthand the Stanley Cup celebration down in Charleston with Colorado Avalanche coach Jared Bednar, a former Charleston Stingrays ECHL coach, and he had the celebration going with the Stanley Cup. Great story from Scotty here. You can hear an extended version of his segment. Got a playlist on the YouTube channel of show segments. You can always go and check those out. Here's a very brief snippet of that as we take a quick break on the program. Right back after this. Scott Eisberg, 3 Stanley Cup rules when you are celebrating the championship of the NHL.
Number 1, only the first 2 companies that they can hold it up. Number 2, goes to bed at 10:30. Number 3, you're not allowed to bring it in a swimming pool, and it cannot go to a strip club. Because I believe Mark Messier brought it to a strip club in like 87, and it did not go well. And then apparently, I think Mario Lemieux dropped it in a swimming pool, and it ended up sitting at the bottom of a swimming pool when the Penguins won it, and there was some definite issues with that. So, I think it's accumulated rules over the years, but for the most part, you've got free reign with the Stanley Cup when it's there at the party.
On this program, wanted to tell you about Freedom Primary Care. If you are like I am these days and really appreciate freedom, and maybe in a different way than you have your entire life, Freedom Primary Care does that for you from a healthcare standpoint. They want to make sure that you are free to make your medical choices, and they're going to lay out plenty of options for you. And if you're looking for a more naturally minded way to move forward with your health care, they can present you those options. If you're looking for traditional minded healthcare, they can do that as well. They have natural solutions, like I mentioned before, but they can take care of you in multiple ways. And what I appreciate most about Freedom Primary Care is this phrase, and I never thought it would be a thing in my life when you really have to pay attention to who you trust with your family's health care and how you trust them. But the line that they have, that they're responsible to you, they are not responsible for you. Responsible to you, not for you, I think is been my approach to healthcare for a long time, right? Doctors are very well qualified medical professionals. They are not miracle workers. They are not responsible to keep all of us healthy. We are responsible to keep ourselves healthy. And then we need to rely on doctors to help us out in the process. That's exactly what Freedom Primary Care does. Give them a call at 803-627-2447. They're currently located in Fort Mill, South Carolina, up near where I live, but they have telemedicine options for you, so you don't have to be in the area necessarily to take advantage of Freedom Primary Care. Again, the phone number, 803-627-2447. Please support those who support the program. Really appreciate Freedom Primary Care being on board, and really appreciate you being a part of the program as well. Teddy D weighing in says, okay, I know this is totally random, but is anyone else hooked on Shark Week like I am? A great way to get the second half of the show going, even though we're past the mathematical second half of the show by a significant margin. That's where we are this time of the year. Troy says, I watched Jaws again a couple of days ago, and the movie never gets old. Teddy D comes back. Man, there are some, right? And that is the theater of the mind at its finest, right, Jaws? It is the fact that you get a snippet maybe, right? But it's that first-person view of the shark and the music and you in your mind imagine it being 1,000 times worse than reality or whatever it is. The fact that they played on that, just brilliant, and shows just how long that plays. That never doesn't play. It's why the movie hasn't aged out, because that terror, abject terror of something coming at you in the water that you can't see but can see you. Crazy. I don't know, Craig. I don't know if Beverly Hills Cop holds up quite like Jaws, my friend. I don't know it. I couldn't tell you the last time I ever even thought about Beverly Hills Cop. I mean, I'm a big Eddie Murphy fan. Like the series. I remember seeing Beverly Hills Cop 3, I think, in the theaters during high school. I don't think you can put those two in the same category. I think Jaws is way up there. Beverly Hills Cop down significantly from there. Wanted to recap, though, the G.G. Jackson news, how it went down on Saturday. And again, the number one recruit in the country, the number one prospect in the country committing to the University of South Carolina is always going to be a big thing in any sport. Jadeveon Clowney, bigger than G.G. Jackson in a lot of ways, right? Football, freak prospect. I haven't heard G.G. Jackson described like Jadeveon Clowney was. Clowney was a generational type athletic freak. And with Steve Spurrier there, with the Gamecocks coming off an SEC East Division title, a different thing, right, than where we are now. First of all, Gamecock football and basketball. Clearly the state of South Carolina, a football state. South Carolina basketball, outside of the Final Four run 5 years ago, has never been a program of significance in its sport. It just hasn't. I mean, I guess if you really want to be sensitive, you go back. No, Frank McGuire had them going, and okay, you're right. That has happened. That did happen. Eddie Fogler did win an SEC championship in 1996, right? So I shouldn't say has rarely been a program of significance. And then the state of South Carolina in general, this is the rare time, again, I'm going to repeat it. Perception greater than reality. Reality is G.G. Jackson now comes to Carolina as the number 10 prospect this season. Reclassified to class of 2022 on 3. A recruiting service has now put him in that class, the new class, this year's class, and tried to rate him, and they put him at number 10 in the country. Still, a tremendously high recruit coming to your program, but the fact that he is a Columbia guy, Ridgeview High School, and the fact that this just doesn't happen very often at the University of South Carolina or the state of South Carolina, where big-time prospects decide to stay. And it would be one thing had Frank Martin stayed at South Carolina, and as the story goes, reported on by On3's Jamie Shaw, G.G. Jackson committed to Frank Martin in South Carolina behind closed doors, non-publicly, verbally, and then changed course when Frank was let go. But then to see G.G. Jackson verbally commit to the University of North Carolina. Lamont Paris coming in for Frank Martin as a relative unknown from a big name standpoint in college basketball. The resume, by the way, if you look into it, I think you'll find it's a lot more solid than you, or maybe more encouraging. I think the more you look into it, the more I listen to him, the more the stronger I think his resume, his candidacy, his likelihood of success at South Carolina got to me, the more I've looked into him. And now you add this in. A lot of transfers out as happens, right? As you anticipate when you have a coaching change. Gamecock basketball, year 1, Lamont Paris kind of left to pick up the pieces, but coming in, taking G.G. Jackson away from North Carolina, knowing Jackson is the first decommitment since 2003 when J.R. Smith decided to go to the NBA instead of go to North Carolina, and the first commit in modern basketball history to say, no, I'm changing my mind. I'm not going to go to North Carolina. I'm going to go play in college basketball for somebody else. So the impact of that for this new South Carolina coach and this South Carolina basketball program right now, to me, the perception of that one big time guy thinks that's the best way to go is moving in that direction, to me is more important right now from a perception standpoint. Making Gamecock basketball relevant, much more relevant than it has been, I think, in a lot of top prospects' minds, than the reality of what I anticipate will be a 1-year stop. Not even a full year, right? This time next year, the NBA draft will have happened already. Gigi Jackson, who turns 18 in December, is just barely eligible for that. And when you're ranked number 10 in a class now, and what I read today is that NBA sources telling Jamie Shaw there from On3 that a projected NBA pick somewhere in the 5 to 12 range right now is where Gigi Jackson would be for next year's NBA draft. Well, if it's not a one and done year, things have gone wrong. And it's not a good sign for Gamecock basketball moving forward, even though it's kind of counterintuitive, right? That you would much rather have a big time player for 2 years instead of one, but you got to factor in there, if that first year doesn't go well, then it's a different type of 2-year scenario than you might be thinking in your head, where a guy just wants to stick around more. Now, in this new era of name, image, and likeness, is it possible that what we've seen in the last 15-ish years, the one and done formula, gets tweaked a little bit? I think it's possible, but I don't think it's likely with what I've read about the NBA's collective bargaining agreement about to change and how that will financially impact negatively, I should probably say, future draft picks, not this coming NBA draft, but after that. So I think it's completely plausible for college basketball, big-time head coaches and programs to sell, and this is no pun intended now, to sell the, I don't even know what the word is exactly. Longevity is not quite the word, but to sell the consistency, the benefits of staying in a big-time college program for more than a year now, because you get more exposure, you get paid at the same time with name, image, and likeness. Maybe not the numbers and then the security of getting drafted and having a multi-year contract. But if you're not going to be a top 5 pick, let's say, and you are projected more in the 6 to 15 or 20 range, you might be able to sell a kid and to say, hey man, you're not the guy from an NBA draft perspective this year. You're going to be a guy. You're not the guy. You stay here with us, you're going to become the guy. And you're going to be able to live a really good next year of your life in the process, both financially, but socially, and then from a, I even hate bringing it up, right? From a brand perspective, your brand is only going to grow. You're trading sitting on the bench in the NBA and getting absolutely worn out in practice by professional basketball players who won't like you very much, who won't take too kindly to you. You trade that in for being the absolute superstar and headliner and the game that ESPN or CBS, ABC is pumping up every week and adored by tens of thousands of our fans. That's a pretty strong sales pitch, I think, in a lot of ways. But I think we might still be off, might be a couple of years off that. Gigi Jackson might be missing that by a year with the NBA's collective bargaining agreement. It might be a bit of a moot point there. If you can make X millions of dollars more by turning pro a year earlier, you're probably going to do that. Kind of like Rattler, Craig says, I guess, in this NIL world. And who knows what the total amount will be from a name, image, and likeness standpoint for G.G. Jackson in his time with the University of South Carolina. But the fact that it has worked out, that name, image, and likeness, the new era of college sports has been such a good thing, has helped for sure, has been a major factor in the University of North Carolina losing a basketball commit to the University of South Carolina. Never saw that coming. Because like Branden Conrad, the former Gamecock basketball player who we had on at the beginning of the program, mentioned, like, North Carolina can put together some name, image, and likeness deals too. You find it hard to believe that a South Carolina name, image, and likeness deal would be the difference that makes someone decommit from North Carolina and go to South Carolina. And in this case, it seems like it's more of the moving things up and changing the timeline, right? That there's a commitment in. Pete Nance, I think is the kid's name, from Northwestern, transferring into North Carolina, who allegedly took the last scholarship available for this year's season, 22-23. And that wasn't the plan for G.G. Jackson at North Carolina. Presented with that plan, either North Carolina wasn't going to make it happen, or they weren't a fan of it, or whatever it was. However it went down exactly. But G.G. Jackson committing to South Carolina, the impact of all of that, to me, seems to be massive. Especially when compared with, I asked Branden specifically, what's going to be a reasonable expectation? He avoided that completely. Because I don't know if there can be one, right, outside of knowing that Anthony Edwards did not make Georgia's basketball program nationally relevant. Tom Crean doesn't have the job anymore. There wasn't the next guy after him, and it didn't become a thing. And really good player. Kind of a highlight reel waiting to happen in the NBA. But didn't make Georgia an SEC champion, didn't make them one of the better SEC teams, didn't improve their program significantly moving forward. But again, Georgia's basketball program, maybe on a similar type plane as South Carolina in a lot of ways. Not at a football school to start with. And then no history of sustained success. So there might be some of that in there. Georgia being a big football state. But it's just such a larger state. Atlanta is such a massive area that it's hard for me to equate the two. And you got Georgia Tech in the state of Georgia as well, in my mind, being a basketball school. But those Lethal Weapon 3 Final Four days of Bobby Cremins, and then not long after that, going back to the Final Four, those are a long, long ways off. Georgia Tech, Mark Price ain't coming through that door anytime soon. It's been a long time since those guys played at Georgia Tech. So, again, the Georgia-South Carolina comparison may be way off. But from the South Carolina perspective, knowing what big-time basketball prospects, their relationship has been with South Carolina basketball fans through the years, that's what's changed here. And again, P.J. Dozier is an example, but when you have your dad and your uncle playing, when you had your sister going to the school, it's a different deal. It's a different deal. B.J. Mackey was a big-time player and a big-time prospect back in the day. You want to point to him. You want to point to Rolando Howe. Yeah, big-time players have come to the University of South Carolina to play. It has happened. But those guys weren't number one that I know of in their class. And now they were closer to that number 10 ranking where Jackson has reclassified and then now been put into that class of 2022 that I've seen there from one recruiting source or one recruiting service there that does that thing. But it's the fact that there was a situation where the program was in good shape and one head coach seemed to have secured a commitment and the school moves away from him. Frank Martin moves on, ends up at UMass. And yet, while this happens, G.G. Jackson gets scooped up by North Carolina, which has happened so many times, most recently with Seventh Woods, Raymond Felton, Larry Davis, go down the list. Zion Williamson got scooped up by Duke. John Morant somehow got out of the state to Murray State. Ray Allen goes up to UConn. Kevin Garnett and Jermaine O'Neal didn't even play college basketball at all, jumped straight to the NBA. So now, from a reality standpoint, I think the odds of G.G. Jackson having a career at Carolina, or maybe a year, more like P.J. Dozier or Rolando Howell, probably most likely, right? Odds are he ain't staying 4 years like B.J. Mackey did and winning an SEC championship. His game, his frame, much more suited to move on to the pro game, unfortunately, for B.J. Mackey than his frame and his game did. Just was kind of in between that 1 and 2 and never could make that jump to the NBA. But when you're 6'8", 6'9" at 17 years old, being the MVP of an all-star camp this past summer, you're well on your way, it looks like, where G.G. Jackson is. And that is even more so than P.J. Dozier was at his point in high school, Rolando Howell at his point even. But now what happens, man? I think, again, how Lamont Paris plays this, how G.G. Jackson handles this is going to be significant moving forward. It is that if you can handle this in the right way, and I don't even know how you do it, right? Because you're now a hometown hero. That was in the initial tweet. I guess that's the best way to reframe this thing, right? Let's go back through it, how it played out on Twitter. Dawn Staley, the first one I saw Saturday, maybe right after I saw the G.G. Jackson, an announcement coming at 3. She put out the tweet, "Sing along, ain't nothing but a G thing, baby." So then it was pretty obvious to me that it was going to be exactly what had been reported. And that's exactly what popped up at 3:03. The tweet from G.G. Jackson himself: "I'd like to announce that I will be reclassifying to the class of 2022, committing to the University of South Carolina to further my career in education." All caps. "Now let's have fun, fams," with the hashtag hometown hero. Lamont Paris, the new Gamecock coach, responding on Twitter, keeping with Dawn Staley's old school theme. And if you don't know, now you know. Notorious B.I.G. following up the Snoop Dogg. And then there's a picture that pops up on Jeff Goodman, national college basketball reporter. Lamont Paris over at the Peach Jam in North Augusta, smiling big, giving the old Spurs up sign beside some other coaches there watching in the small gyms who look like they're being massively invaded. Spencer Rattler puts up the picture of he and G.G. Jackson. Looks like at the football operations building. I think that's where this is. Maybe the Rice building. Not quite sure. Over at Carolina with the Spurs up. Just saying, let's get it. And Kerry Rich, who's now on staff with the Gamecock basketball, operation, the program, saying, Gamecock Nation, now let's have some fun. I promise we can't do it without you. Hashtag defy the myth. Hashtag just getting started. Then it was others in the South Carolina Athletics Department tweeting out the season ticket links and trying to capitalize immediately. Again, an example, I think, of why a kid like G.G. Jackson deserves name, image, and likeness money. I'm sure there was a solid increase, and I know what I even saw specific sections of the lower bowl on display there on Twitter of what's available for Gamecock season ticket holders. To me, the question now goes, all right, what's a reasonable expectation for a 17-year-old coming in to play basketball at the University of South Carolina in year number 1 for a new head coach coming from Chattanooga, going up against SEC competition? And I don't even think it's going to be a NCAA tournament or bust type mentality from Gamecock basketball fans. I don't think it should be, clearly based on the history. And Frank Martin couldn't even get back there after a Final Four run. So I think it's too much to think is logical, to think is rational. Oh, it'd be ideal. Certainly nobody would turn that down. You'd like to see that. And I'm sure if Lamont Paris has his team somewhat relevant in the SEC come February, that'll absolutely pick up the momentum and be the goal and be the storyline for sure. But there's a long way to go to get there. And putting it all on the shoulders of one player, I think we've seen is a bit ridiculous. I mean, Zion Williamson is the best example, the most recent example, too, of an absolute phenom. Number 1 player in the class. I guess maybe he was even rated number 2, right? Behind the other guy at Duke that went there. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. But from the South Carolina perspective and how they did that, I still don't know, just from the freak athleticism part of it and the kind of the cult of personality that was and is Zion Williamson. But we saw he and his other 5 guys who are so highly rated not be able to, that barely escaped the regional in Columbia and Central Florida and Johnny Dawkins Jr. there, right? They barely got to the Sweet 16 and then eliminated there. So I think knowing what happened with Anthony Edwards there in Georgia recently, I don't think you can say you got to go to the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, it's not even, it's going to be a bust. Again, perception in this case, more important than reality. Just this happening, I think, is what will be remembered more than anything. I think it's going to be really, really difficult. I should probably say it this way. It's going to be really, really difficult for G.G. Jackson, Lamont Paris, and South Carolina basketball to make reality bigger than perception here. More important than the perception. Because I don't know what it would take. I think it would take a run to at least the Sweet 16 to make actuality, reality, the Gamecocks on the court bigger than this off the court development, and especially the way that it went down with North Carolina being involved. But what it does in reality is put a stamp on South Carolina basketball from a relevant standpoint. And Lamont Paris is not going to be a sneaky, quiet hire anymore, or a sneaky, quiet newcomer to the SEC with this news. G.G. Jackson will be known nationally now, and certainly across the SEC. Will have the target on his back and the whole thing. And it will be a story for sure, one way or the other. It has to be. And so I think a relatively logical, rational expectation for a guy like G.G. Jackson coming in, double-digit points, 6+ rebounds per game, couple of block shots. Outside of that, so much is going to be dependent on what this team has, who they turn out to be, if they can turn out to be even a competitive team. I think competitive is the first goal, right? You got to work your way there first from the South Carolina basketball perspective. A program that has been that, they've been competitive, but the fact that they've just been that, especially coming off the Final Four run, and Frank Martin had the personality that he did, that combination just wasn't enough to continue. And Lamont Paris comes in and is almost 180 degrees from what I heard in his introductory press conference. Players coach, going to allow them to play offensively, certainly going to stress defense. So from that standpoint, not that big a difference, X's and O's wise, than what we saw from Frank Martin. But from a personality standpoint, a guy that does impersonations and would prefer, isn't going to get in guys' faces and be a sideline personality like what South Carolina fans have seen the last 10 years. That's going to be fascinating to see. So that to me also in 2022 lends to the idea that this will have the opportunity to create a foundation for Lamont Paris and his program of being a friendly destination for really good players to come to college basketball. If the G.G. Jackson recipe works out, 1 year, NBA draft lottery, successful NBA career, well, there you go. You have now a blueprint that has never happened in the history of South Carolina basketball as a state. I don't remember a guy doing that at Clemson. I don't think it's happened. The one and done recipe. BJ Dozier has gone on to the NBA after playing 2 years at South Carolina, but he didn't get drafted. He's had to slug his way through the G League and the two-way contracts and the whole thing. To his credit, he's done it by and large, coming off another injury and looking to do it again, to regain the momentum his career had. Certainly hope he can. Darius Thornwell, all 4 years at Carolina, and did get drafted, but he went in the second round. And the NBA success hasn't been there, certainly to the degree that he would have liked, and that other guys, that other programs, Kentucky obviously being the standard, I think, in the one and done era, and just a completely different way to do it. The North Carolinas and the Dukes have seemed to follow, but maybe with a little bit more consistent team success might be the best way to put that. I don't know. You had the COVID year issues with Duke as well. But we just never seen this. Never seen it. That's why I think right now the perception completely bigger than reality, and that's a good thing when it comes to South Carolina basketball. And South Carolina, maybe athletics as a whole. Spencer Rattler, 5-star guy. G.G. Jackson, I tweeted it out the other day. What were the odds of that picture happening a year ago this time, when Spencer Rattler went into the football season as the odds-on Heisman Trophy favorite, as the Oklahoma quarterback, with Lincoln Riley as his coach? When G.G. Jackson is still 2 years away from getting to college this time last year, on his path to before reclassifying. So the odds of all this happening, small to begin with, and yet here we are. And going to be fascinating to see how it works out, man, in so many ways. So we talked a bunch about the G.G. Jackson situation, and again, it's not because it's a talented recruit coming to play at the University of South Carolina. It's so much more than that. Why we talked about it as much as we had, why I think it has the significance that it does. And this Tennessee news that came out on Friday is almost the exact opposite, right? traditionally, this headline, Tennessee hit with 18 NCAA violations, all level 1, the highest you can get for a football program. Normally, that headline reads, well, the reaction to that action would be major NCAA violations or major NCAA penalties. But the fact that Tennessee made the very conscious decision to not only cooperate, but to be pretty aggressive, I think, to be pretty proactive. And I think we saw this from South Carolina's athletics department with the Wesley Saunders deal back in the day, with even the Lamont Evans stuff, PJ Dozier and Sindarius Thornwell being rumored to be being reported to be part of that whole investigation. I don't know if Tennessee had much of a choice here, but the Andy Staples article from The Athletic, I think, sums it up perfectly, that what Tennessee did by being pretty aggressive and pretty strong in their own investigation and their own self-penalties, taking away some scholarships, is, well, they just made their own case to back up not paying Jeremy Pruitt his buyout, which Pruitt said he was going to sue the school and hasn't even done, I don't think. And he says he's looking forward to telling his side. But when you read this thing and you see that Pruitt's wife was caught paying a down payment for a car, or payments for a car, and then a down payment for an apartment, when you see multiple assistant coaches and staffers arranged visits during a COVID blackout, basically, where the school was not allowed, no schools were allowed to have visitors anywhere close to the campus. I don't know what you can come back with, right? How can Pruitt say, no, it wasn't me? Being responsible for that, seeing that the NCAA didn't take it to the next level, and say lack of institutional control, which normally comes along with major violations because of the way that they basically fired Pruitt, moved on from athletic directors, have totally moved on, and the football program is in such better shape. They picked third this year. I don't know. I don't think they were ever picked that high under Jeremy Pruitt. Not that that absolutely means something. What means a lot more is that they were 7-6 last year, that they were relevant. I think 4-4 in conference play, one game better than the Gamecocks. That the offense was among the best in the country somehow, even with all the transfers out, with very limited proven production coming back once Hendon Hooker and company got it going. And again, the progression of the offense and the program, beginning of the season, okay, kept getting better and better and better. And now you move into year number 2. But the expectations are going to be massive. Going to pop up the preseason poll there in the East, where the Gamecocks are 5th, just ahead of Missouri at 6 and Vandy at last, Florida in 4th, Tennessee in 3rd as we move up the rankings. Kentucky getting the nod at number 2 over Tennessee was kind of a bit surprising to me, and probably a blessing for Josh Heupel and company. But I think Tennessee fans absolutely think they should finish at least 2nd. They should finish 2nd in the East. They're going to be really ticked off if they can't beat Kentucky and Florida, and certainly South Carolina and Missouri and Vandy. But with the Gamecocks getting picked 5th there, put out the poll question on Twitter. How does that make you feel? And good motivation for the team, almost half the votes. 120 total in, 47.5% of you going with good motivation for the team. Second place was completely irrelevant, which it almost always is in a lot of ways. About right was a close 3rd place, and disrespectful in 4th. So that makes me think that Gamecock fans, relatively rational, at least the ones that voted here, reasonable. I think it will be good motivation and something that Shane Beamer can work with. saying people don't believe, and then you can always pop up the Vegas number of 6 wins, I think, is the over-under for the season. Most services have Carolina at already, especially for a guy who already has plenty to prove in Spencer Rattler. Marcus Satterfield kind of famously at this point told him, fans think we stink. Let's prove them wrong together. 5th in the SEC East isn't a whole lot better than fans think you stink, right? When you're picked above Vandy and Mizzou in the SEC East. And again, Missouri will have that as well. So 2 through 6. I don't see anybody. I'll pop it back up here on the video live stream. I don't see any of those teams, 2 through 6. Kentucky, Tennessee, Florida, the Gamecocks, and Missouri. Being I don't know, what's the highest you get in the country there? 15? You crack the top 15, any of those teams, I'll be very surprised. But then now as I play it through in my head too, how college football works, the second team in the SEC East is almost by default going to be a top 25 team. Unless the West just completely rolls through. And it seems to set up that way this year in a lot of ways. When Auburn is picked last, Mississippi State right before them, there is no Vanderbilt over in the West. There is no Arkansas of several years ago over in the West. But I guess how LSU does in year number 1 with Brian Kelly. What kind of success Mississippi State can have moving the football, and if their defense can be anything close to kind of what it was last year in a lot of ways. What about Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss? Can they continue to be relevant after finishing second last year? Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M picked to finish second this year. Arkansas is third. Arkansas going to be able to keep it going? I think so. When you lead the league in rushing, when your quarterback is a big part of that. I mean, I guess the flip side of that is, what if he gets dinged up, right? That could change things real quick. All part of the preseason conversation for sure. The complete preseason poll up now with the West: Alabama 1, A&M 2, Arkansas 3, Ole Miss at 4, LSU 5, Mississippi State at 6, Auburn at 7. I think I would drop A&M down in this thing. I'd probably go Arkansas, Ole Miss, A&M 2, 3, 4. Arkansas 2, Ole Miss 3, A&M down at 4. I'm just not believing the hype. I don't think Max Johnson's going to be the guy to deliver Jimbo and Texas A&M back into contention there towards the top. Well, we'll see. And the checks that he was writing this offseason at Nick Saban, those are some big checks. Good luck cashing those things in. So all part of a really relatively quiet weekend nationally for sure, but not for Gamecock fans with that Saturday news. To me, almost perfect timing as well, coming off SEC Media Days, right? This was still, I think, maybe a couple of weeks after the original report was out from On3's Jamie Shaw that this was going to go down. So you don't want that to linger too long. And with a new semester starting relatively soon, right? We're going to be talking about preseason camp kicking off pretty soon for football, and then basketball workouts, classes starting in the next few weeks. You didn't want it to go on too much longer than that. So the timing, I think, works out. And Gigi Jackson, certainly the talk of South Carolina today, the last several days, will maybe play out a couple of more days, and then he gets to, I think, take a breath for sure, go a little bit under the radar with football season cranking up. And Lamont Paris now begins the really difficult work of figuring it out, of building that first team and seeing how they're all going to fit together and be competitive. Feature a guy that comes in with the reputation and the skill set of G.G. Jackson. How that's going to play out. But a great problem to have when you're Lamont Paris right now. I mean, his stock jumped so much over the weekend, I think, amongst Gamecock fans getting this done. And that's again why I will repeat it one last time. Perception bigger than reality here. The perception of Lamont Paris as a Gamecock coach, Gamecock basketball being relevant, the state of South Carolina basketball environment changed when this news went down. That you can take a guy from North Carolina, a committed guy, and bring him to South Carolina with the pitch of being the hometown hero. And to me, this is a home state deal, right? It's not a town thing. It's larger than that in South Carolina. And South Carolina is small enough to still keep it there. I mean, we heard the other day in the tribute to Phil Petty how several of you just think of him more highly because he's a South Carolina native, being from Boiling Springs. And how that just is not the case with most South Carolina quarterbacks. That was part of the Luke Doty story, being from Myrtle Beach. Dylan Thompson before him. Outside of that, Connor Shaw was a Georgia guy. Steve Tannehill from up in Pennsylvania. Todd Ellis from North Carolina. I go down the list. Anthony Wright, also a North Carolina guy. And speaking of Phil Petty, I tweeted it out when I first saw it. I think the York County Gamecock Club, the first place that I saw it. Phil Petty Scholarship has been established. His wife took to Facebook Saturday and put out an emotional message remembering her husband. And man, it's tough to read. And again, all thoughts and prayers go out to the Petty family, especially to his 2 kids and his wife. And she was mentioning how they were about to start a new chapter, coming back to Columbia. He joined the staff at Gray Collegiate. And now just the void that is left. Phil Petty wanted to mention that scholarship has been created by the University of South Carolina in his honor. Funeral services set in North Myrtle Beach tomorrow for Phil Petty, gone at 43. Appreciate all you guys tuning in to today's edition of the program. The Tennessee news that hit on Friday, the G.G. Jackson news on Saturday, and media days having now wrapped up, where we're beginning the post media days portion of the preseason. Right, where everything has been said officially in Atlanta. I think all major pitfalls avoided, seemingly by all parties, right? That is maybe the one thing that we can agree on. Probably not, right? But you don't want to see any players especially, kind of step in it at SEC Media Days. At least I don't. You don't want to see anybody getting personal. What was it? It was a Missouri wide receiver a while back when Missouri was first getting into the conference that kind of put a target on his own back, saying, yeah, we'll see. I know they're saying the SEC is the best conference, but the Big 12 was pretty good too. And Missouri, we're going to show everybody. And oh boy, that was bold. None of that type of talk, at least that I saw pop up in the last several days. I think all the players were a little savvier than that. And the coaches, I mean, you're not getting bigger than Jimbo and Saban and what they did a couple of months ago now. The Brian Harsin thing, I think, maybe the most fascinating to come out of SEC Media Days. The we're stronger now, and kind of that us against the world mentality. We're going to show you. Whew, that leash so short, so short. this program about 2 hours long, and we're hitting it right now, and appreciate you joining us. Doing it 8 to 10, Monday through Friday, every day. Tomorrow will be a new one. Who knows what the main topic will be? I'm guessing we will touch on Gigi Jackson, even a couple of days removed from the big news on Saturday. Certainly talk a bunch of college football and continue that in a major way moving forward. My thanks to my guest, Branden Conrad, former Gamecock basketball player and former president of the Lettermen Association over at Carolina. You can always check out the old episodes on the YouTube channel. You can check those out archived on podcast platforms all over the place as well. Remember the live audio, in case you want to check that from 8 to 10. Check that out. That's on Podbean every morning. But the archive version of the audio podcast all over the place. iTunes, Google, Spotify, wherever you get the podcast, you can get this one. And appreciate you doing that. Appreciate your support. Please like and subscribe and all that stuff as well. Jason says, see you tomorrow. We will do that. This is the July 25th edition of Tim Hill, Unrestricted Free Agent.